Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's KATORS88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.
So today, we're not just talking about witches. We're talking about midwives.
I forgot the topic. I have no idea what's in it, but this is...
Women who have delivered babies, tended to the sick, and held the knowledge of life and death in their hands for thousands of years.
Is this the midwives or the witches?
Well, I don't know. Let's see if you can tell the difference.
Oh, okay. I think one has a medical background, but okay.
Okay, yeah.
You know what? I had never heard of a midwife, like in a modern sense, until we talked about having a home birth for our kid. I thought midwives were like, you know, prairie days. Don't have a doctor, but you got midwives.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So, yeah, what was your opinion on midwives then?
I thought, does this person have the adequate medical knowledge? Is this a layperson without formal training? Because I didn't know anything about midwives. And I didn't know you could have a midwife in the you could have a midwife in the hospital with you, right?
Yeah, some hospitals have midwives.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, midwives are generally thought of a lot of times in our culture as being something that's less than.
Mm-hmm.
And that's by design.
I mean, that's what I thought.
It's on purpose. For most of human history, birth was the women's domain. Midwives weren't fringe figures. They were essential. They weren't reading from books, though. They were carrying wisdom that was passed down through generations. So, like, men didn't attend births, like way back when, right?
Oh, they weren't even in the room, right?
No, they weren't even in the room. And that also, medically speaking, was the case, too. Like, women tended to women.
Okay.
That's how that went down. They knew all kinds of things. I mean, they knew how to turn breech babies. They knew how to stop hemorrhages. They knew how to soothe pain using herbs grown in their gardens. They attended to miscarriages, delivered stillborn babies. They stayed with women through death and birth alike. Because there's a lot of death surrounding birth back then.
Right. Mortality rates were really high.
Yes. So this was in pre-industrial Europe. There was no male doctors riding into rural villages to deliver these babies. There were just women with knowledge. The problem is that with that knowledge, they held power, and that made them targets. So by the 1500s, something started to shift. Medicine began to be professionalized, okay? So universities were formed. Latin became the language that gave you legitimacy. You would learn all these terms and, all the names of things and all the Latin roots and what they meant. And suddenly, the most important qualification to practice medicine wasn't experience anymore. It was theory and like knowing these things via textbook.
Okay.
And then women were denied access to that education. Women were not allowed to be in medical school.
Right.
So doctors were trained in anatomy, but they were rarely trained in childbirth. They studied dead bodies, not living women in labor. And yet they began to insert themselves into obstetrics, not to improve outcomes, but to claim authority. So this is what ended up following. And it was slow, but an aggressive takeover. Midwifery was outlawed in some places. Women were banned from using tools like forceps. Herbal knowledge was dismissed as superstition. And women who practiced healing outside of formal institutions were discredited. So the message was clear. Childbirth was no longer women's work. It was men's science. And women would suffer for it. Midwives were increasingly subjected to state and church licensing and surveillance and forced reporting requirements. For example, midwives were being forced to report unwed mothers.
Oh.
They were being reported on because they would baptize dying infants because nobody was there to baptize them. And so they would get in trouble for that. In the Protestant and Catholic territories alike, Witch trial accusations were disproportionately aimed at women who handled birth, death, and reproductive care,
Oh, that's interesting.
especially if these women lived independently.
Like when we're unmarried?
Yes. And midwives were often widows, and it wasn't like abnormal for a midwife to be living independently.
Okay.
Same thing with like herbalists.
And that was a way they could earn income because all these other avenues of income were...
Yes, and they often it was very, like, the fee was very minimal, or it was free. It was a service they did to the community.
Okay. Oh, I was thinking if they're unmarried, they have to provide for their own well-being.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they were compensated in other ways too. Like we think about like finances.
Oh, yeah, you're
but,
right.
You know, it could have been
room and board,
food, things like that.
Bartering,
yeah. Yes.
Okay.
In some places, midwives had to swear oaths that their knowledge came from God and not the devil, effectively branding their expertise as suspect unless explicitly approved by men in power, like the church.
Yeah.
So enter the witch trials.
Okay.
Between the 15th and 18th century, an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 people were executed for witchcraft in Europe.
That's a lot more than I thought.
And colonial America. Most of them were women. And many of those women were midwives or herbalists.
Huh.
There was a book that was used for witch hunting. It was published in 1486. It's called the Malleus Maleficarum. I totally butchered that, and I apologize. But it called midwives some of the most dangerous women alive.
Oh, because...
They were accused of killing babies,
okay,
offering abortificants, and stealing infant souls for Satan. Because midwives had knowledge about birth, fertility, contraception, and death, those domains the church and state increasingly sought control over. And if you wanted to regulate reproduction, you had to remove women who understood it best and then insert men into their place.
Right. Men that were part of some type of institutional hierarchy
exactly.
of some sort.
Institutional hierarchy of some sort. And the witch trials did exactly that. Women were tortured, hung, and burned. And when they died, they didn't just lose their lives. The communities lost their collective knowledge on childbirth and life and death things that midwives dealt with.
Because then they couldn't pass on their knowledge, and then they couldn't provide it to people in their area. Yes.
And now these people are reliant on the medical community and these universities and these educated. They're systematically removing midwives from the equation.
Kind of reminds me of like when, drastically different scenario, but when mom and pop stores are, outed from a community because they go out of business because like of Walmart or something.
Yeah.
Or Amazon. And then you're forced to rely on Walmart and Amazon.
Yeah. That's exactly what basically happened.
Yeah.
And it's still happening. So, but we're going to talk about the witch trials a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Anyway.
So during the witch trials, roughly between 1450 and 1750, did not realize it was that long.
300. Our country is not even that old.
Yeah.
Oh.
So this was happening in Europe and it echoed a little bit into colonial America. So a witch was less about spell casting and more about social deviance, especially by women. Most accused were not practicing any form of witchcraft. They were often midwives or herbalists, like I was saying, widows or unmarried women, poor or low status women, women who owned property, and outspoken, non-conforming, or difficult to control women.
Property.
Yeah. So it wasn't about what they did. It was about who they were in the patriarchal, religiously dominated, and often economically unstable society. And that became a threat. So if you were threatening the economic fabric or the religious fabric or the patriarchal fabric, you were at risk of being accused of being a witch. So knowledge of plants.
Oh, we just talked about that.
Sorcery. So if you were an herbalist and you had knowledge of plants, it would have been considered my mom would be considered a witch.
Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine. Your mom would just.
My mom is
horrified.
Very much an herbalist, and she would be horrified to know that she'd be considered a witch.
Yeah.
So, people who take ashwagandha or red raspberry leaf or evening primrose oil for hormone balance, back then would have been taking potions. And those who made those potions would be brewing potions, and you would be subjected to possibly being accused of being a witch.
So they're really just like apothecaries.
Literally, yes. Now you're into holistic health. Then you're a witch.
Well, the holistic health now is still talked very lowly about.
It is, and it comes from these roots, though. It comes from these roots of not wanting that in the medical space for religious, economic, and capitalist reasons.
Interesting. That's why they want to keep things that could potentially be very helpful in the right environment under the right supervision, like psilocybin for like major depressive disorder and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I just think about how many weeds, like I've learned so much about just like what we consider weeds in our yard and stuff, like mullein, for example. Mullein has made a huge comeback, which is a weed that grows in your yard, but it's like has amazing respiratory health benefits. And if you were to use that for respiratory health benefits, it's funny because today we look at that and we're like,
so primitive.
That's so woo-woo. But back then people were using that, and then that was causing them to be prosecuted. So then any knowledge of contraception meant basically that you had a pact with the devil.
Can you elaborate?
You made a baby disappear.
Even though it's keeping a baby from ever actually being there.
Yeah, but you're preventing life. So that's a pact with the devil.
Okay. Sorry. The superstition stuff really gets me. Like it's wild to me. And I've kind of like laughed a few times about it. It's not like I think, oh, this is hilarious, but it's like, I just can't believe the level of superstition,
Yeah. Women who were loud, defiant, or questioned church or the state were dangerous. And now they would be considered like advocates, right? Like you're advocating for reproductive rights or advocating for or protesting injustice or confronting misogyny. Like I would fall into this category. And so back then you would be cursing the magistrate. Like you'd be considered somebody who did that if you were loud and outspoken or going against the grain, basically.
Yeah.
And today you're an advocate.
Interesting. I still think today, like in religious circles, you can be labeled a deconstructionist and ostracized for questioning or going against the mainstream of what like mainline Christianity says, right? Or you could be considered anti-science if you're pro these other things, right? I mean, isn't it?
Yeah.
Aren't people still but women still labeled that way?
Yeah. Something I find interesting is land-owning widows were common targets because they lacked male protection.
Dude. And they want that land.
They wanted the land. And there's a lot of research and a lot of historical background that really kind of insinuates that the witch trials were a huge land grab.
Whoa.
From women.
Whoa, that is wild. Huh.
Yeah, so the land grabbing thing is like super interesting because land gave women economic power. So anything that threatens the fabric of the economy or anything like that makes you a target, like we were saying. So accusations of witchcraft were frequently used to strip women of property, seize homes or farmland, or eliminate rivals, often with the full cooperation of legal and religious institutions. So what would happen is in many regions, an accused witch's land, livestock, and possessions were automatically forfeited to the church, local authorities, or even their neighbors. This was especially true if the accused died under torture or execution, they had no male heir or husband, or the community was economically strained. So an accusation basically equated to asset forfeiture. And this created really perverse incentives because the wealthier the accused woman, the more tempting the accusation.
Yeah.
So widows, spinsters, and unmarried women often owned or inherited property in their own names. And their land couldn't be easily absorbed by male relatives or institutions unless they were branded witches. So these women were more vulnerable socially and legally and had no male advocate to defend their innocence. In small villages, accusations were often personal and strategic, like disputes over fences or grazing lands, or an inheritance could escalate into witchcraft trials.
This is unbelievable.
There was one woman, Katharina Hennot. She was from Germany. This was 1627. She was a successful postmistress, which was...
Like a postmaster?
Yeah, which was like very few women were involved in that.
So,
one of the very few women that were running critical infrastructure, essentially.
Yeah.
And a rival male, M-A-I-L, male network backed by the church wanted her route. So she was accused of witchcraft. Despite no history of healing or magic, she was tortured, convicted, and burned alive.
Oh, my God.
And her execution cleared the way for her postal franchise to be absorbed by her competitors. Two of the largest and deadliest witch trials in Europe, where over 1,000 people were executed. In one town, the Würzburg, I think is how you say it. It's in Germany. The bishop compensated the assets of those executed, growing church wealth tremendously.
Yeah.
And the property transfers were very well documented. The church and local officials profited from every single execution.
Dang. I had no idea about any of this. Why? I didn't learn any of this in school.
And in those ones specifically, those that were accused were wealthy townspeople, mayors' wives, minor nobility, not just the rural poor. So that made that unique.
Well, they also probably got a lot more land and money.
Yeah, exactly. It was to grow the church's purse.
It's a huge wealth transfer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the extent of my real knowledge about the witch trials is like the Crucible.
Yeah, like I didn't learn about this in school. That like basically we were executing herbalists and midwives and widows and people who owned land or threatened the economy.
Yeah.
Okay, back on track. Another reason for being accused to be a witch would be being too educated.
Okay. All right.
Education was subversive. And back then you would be considered reading forbidden texts.
Why would they be I don't understand that.
Because women's literacy was dangerous. Women weren't allowed to be involved in education like men were.
Got it. Okay.
When women profited outside of male control, they were considered like operating dark arts.
Okay. Oh my God.
Women's strong emotions even were used as evidence of demonic possession. So like women in grieving, people would maybe say or accuse that she was howling like a witch.
And I don't know if you did any research but this is all like Europe and colonies. This is not like anything Eastern.
Oh, yes. No, I'm talking European and American colonial.
Yeah.
Yes. You didn't need to be magical. You didn't need to harm anyone. You just had to be a woman outside of the lines. Poor, childless, outspoken, too independent, too knowledgeable, too inconvenient. And that's the part that I think we don't need to ever forget, because the criteria for being labeled as a threat haven't disappeared. They've just evolved. Like it's still very similar. Like women who operate outside the lines are accused of being radical, and even the title feminist is used as a derogatory term sometimes.
Yeah.
When it's like, we're just trying to fight for equality of all sexes. Like, that's not that radical.
It's interesting. It's very similar. It reminds you of Black Lives Matter, and people want to say all lives matter.
Yeah.
So like feminism is like, oh, you're just pro women and you hate men. Or for Black Lives Matter, oh, you just think Black Lives Matter?
Yeah.
It's so silly.
Yeah.
Because like, no, we're advocating for a group that doesn't have the opportunities or equality of this other group. So we're going to emphasize that group, like Black Lives or feminism referring to women.
So I want you to remember, because we're going to move on with the midwife thing.
Okay.
I want you to remember, for centuries and centuries, you had women who held immense knowledge, and with that knowledge, there's a lot of power, and they passed that down from generation to generation. And then you had, by the 1800s, the medical profession was fully institutionalized. So, but before then, it was women caring for women. And yes, there was a lot. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of maternal death. There was a lot of death, or there wasn't a lot of mortality. There was a lot of mortality. I'm not saying there wasn't mortality. There was a lot of mortality. But there was still a lot of mortality even after the 1800s when the medical profession was fully institutionalized.
Yeah.
I don't think we can pin that all on midwifery. Birth had moved from the home to the hospital, and male doctors now dominated obstetrics. And so as male physicians gained dominance in the 17th through the 19th centuries, they used textbooks, journals, and lectures to discredit midwives. So there was writings that described midwives as ignorant country women, superstitious, unclean, and dangerous, emotionally unstable or irrational, to smear midwives.
Yeah.
So people wouldn't use them.
Propaganda.
Yes. What's interesting is male physicians lacked practical birthing experiences. Like a lot of these men didn't, during this particular time era, didn't really see women having babies. Men were only brought in for elite birth care. So for like royals and stuff like that. In 1847, the American Medical Association's founded, and women are barred from medical schools for decades. So midwives were pushed out of practice or reduced to assistance under male supervision. And it wasn't because the outcomes were better. In fact, maternal mortality rates increased when male doctors began attending births regularly.
I was wondering that.
Because they did not have the proper training in sanitization or hands-on technique. So many introduced deadly infections. But the system really didn't care. It had achieved its goal because medical authority had been centralized and women had been removed from it. Midwives and herbalists often served their communities for a fraction of cost or for free. And by smearing midwives as dangerous or backwards, the new medical profession created demand for their services and protected their income streams. It was a power grab.
Yeah, there is no looking to collaborate.
Yeah, let's be clear here. The midwives were not persecuted because they were bad at what they did. They were persecuted because they were good at it. Because they operated independently of church and state, because they served the poor, the rural, and the disenfranchised. They controlled knowledge and reproduction and contraception, and they offered care without male permission or profit. And that autonomy made them dangerous.
You know what gives credence to that, like as being a skeptical person, is that if it really was about we want the best medical care for women and for birthing mothers, right? Then why wouldn't you say, you know what, we have centralized medical authority. Midwives have a good amount of knowledge and success. We're going to absorb you and you're going to work under us. There's no there isn't even that minimal amount of collaboration.
I mean, some midwives were allowed to be assistants. So when you say under us, what are you meaning?
I mean, like the male doctor calls the shots, but ultimately would give the midwife like a freedom she would need to be able to successfully birth stuff. But we can still kind of control you because, you know, you're under, like we can kick you out and make you stop working.
Yeah, but that's still about control and not about outcomes.
But my thing is, it's like, it's not about outcomes at all because there's no effort to include at all. Whereas if you wanted to include, you're having control. Like you want control and power and you're getting it. And if you were to have them collaborate with you, it's like, we want power and control, but we still want good outcomes. But because you're not allowing them to work with you, we just want power and control.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. There are some historians, some writers, some authors who argue that the witch hunts and the suppression of midwifery throughout the centuries were part of a broader campaign to control reproduction. So to build a labor force for capitalism, you had to regulate women's bodies, who gave birth. You had to like regulate who gave birth, when they gave birth, how often they gave birth, and under whose authority. And midwives stood in the way with that, with their, folk practices.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're thinking, okay, but we've moved on, right? But if you've ever had your pain dismissed, been told you're too hormonal, been pressured into a C-section you didn't want, think that herbs are woo-woo, or believe that nurse midwifery is the wish version of obstetrics, you're still kind of living this history. And the truth is that in the U.S., maternal mortality rate isn't great. And if you're a woman of color, it's even worse by 3 times plus. And although midwifery is on the rise again, it's still treated very often, kind of like you said at the beginning of this episode, as this alternative or unscientific practice. And that is actually like the belief, and there's a lot of laws in many states that prohibit midwifery practicing freely.
What does that mean, practicing it freely?
Like there's some states that don't allow home births, period, even if you have a certified nurse midwife.
Oh.
Now, there are different kinds of midwives. Certified nurse midwives are legally recognized in all 50 states. A lot of those states require a collaborative agreement with an OB, so they have to work under them.
Mm-hmm.
So certified nurse midwives can't act like independently in a lot of those states.
Okay.
There are lay midwives, which are like certified professional midwives, sometimes called certified professional midwives or lay midwives, who attend home births, but they're not registered nurse. They're illegal or unregulated in several states. So, and there's a lot of mixed reviews out there about, I don't want to get too much in the weeds between the two kinds of midwives.
Okay.
Because I do feel like, of course, there needs to be formal training as well as like practice and experience. And I think that that's important. I don't think it can just all be experience. I think you need to have formal training too. But the truth is, in the end, they never hated the midwife. They hated that she didn't need them. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't bow to priests or kings. And she knew the body. She trusted women and she delivered life. And that was enough to burn her. It's amazing to me how much like history repeats itself. It just is different iterations of it. Like oppression repeats itself over and over again. Yeah. It just is different iterations of it.
Yeah. I mean, even just it's just different ways of land grabbing and wealth transfer and stuff.
Yes, it's different.
That's what blew me away about this part of it.
Yes, we just had a massive wealth transfer.
Yeah.
And it was done by a governing body.
Yep.
Yeah, and there are land grabs going on currently with hedge funds buying up single family homes, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a land grab. Big entities buying up farmland.
I mean, it repeats itself over and over again. It's very disheartening.
Yes. And sadly predictable.
We are experiencing, I don't know what it will be written down as in history or how it's going to completely play out here, but we are experiencing something that is a repeat.
Yeah.
People are losing rights, and that is never good for anyone.
No.
Like, that's what I don't get. Less rights is never good for anybody.
No, it's not. And when you think about it, it just means more government enforcement of whatever they deem to be a right or not.
Right. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is when your party is in power, you might agree with the things that they deem as right. But when they're not in power and those laws have been passed and the government's been given the power already, like that script could flip.
Yep. Other parties going to do the same thing.
Yeah. You're not safe.
I remember back in the early 2000s with the Patriot Act and all the surveillance and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking away people's right to privacy.
Yeah.
And that wasn't good for anybody.
No. The women's rights being infringed upon or women's rights not being enshrined in the Constitution is absolutely terrifying to me, because something that we really don't talk about with Nazi Germany is that how severely women's rights were suppressed. Women's rights were among the very first to be rolled back when the Nazis rose to power in Germany. The Nazi regime launched a deliberate strategic campaign to strip women of their autonomy, remove them from public life, and redefine them solely as mothers and bearers of the Aryan race. They were purged from civil service jobs, journalism, law, university, faculties. And the law for restoration of the professional civil service, which was passed in 1933, excluded Jewish and female professionals. Female teachers, doctors, lawyers pushed out of their positions. women were forced out of politics. The Nazi Party dissolved all women's political organizations except its own, which its own preached submission, motherhood, and loyalty to Hitler. And the German parliament had fewer and fewer women. Most were removed by the mid-1930s. There was quotas imposed on the number of women allowed in universities, sometimes as low as 10%. You couldn't have more than 10% of women at the university. They were only encouraged to study appropriate subjects like domestic science, nursing, or teaching. And then higher education for women was labeled as unnecessary and dangerous to their femininity. If you were married, you were barred from most jobs, especially in public service or academia. Women were actively incentivized to leave their jobs so men could take them. And the regime offered marriage loans and mothers' crosses, medals, to encourage childbirth and domesticness. Abortion was criminalized and harshly punished unless the woman was considered racially unfit, in which case forced sterilization or abortion was imposed. In fact, there was a law for the prevention of hereditary diseased offspring, which led to the forced sterilization of 400,000 people. Many of them were women labeled as mentally ill, disabled, or socially deviant. Birth control access was restricted and reproductive choices were placed under state control. Women could be denied marriage rights if deemed racially unfit or unhealthy. Women were told their highest duties was to be wives, mothers, and homemakers. There was even a slogan, and I can't say it in German. Basically, in translation, it's children, kitchen, church. That was like considered the ideal womanhood. Not all women were oppressed equally. I'm not saying that, because Aryan women were encouraged to breed and stay domestic, while Jewish, disabled, Roma, black women were sterilized, experimented on, or sent to camps. So they were not, like, I'm not talking like they're apples and oranges. But if we're just talking about women in general, like their rights were the first to go. We should do a podcast called How Authoritarianism Targets Women First.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
I mean, did you know that about women's rights in Nazi Germany?
No.
Yeah.
What's always fascinated and frightened me about what Hitler did, because I read biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and part of it talks about all the political moves that Hitler did to consolidate power and eventually become the dictator he was. And it was all either legal or had dramatic amounts of popular support. Like, I think there was a time, and I'm going to misquote this, but you can get the spirit of it, where something was bombed or put on fire. Reminds you of Nero in Rome, actually, who blamed it on the Christians and had a big Christian persecution. But in Nazi Germany, there was some bombing or whatever, and I think he dissolved parliament as a result, the parliament, and held new elections, I think, when it was all people that, were Nazi party or whatever. It was something like that, but basically everything he did was legal under the government or was extremely popular, where it didn't matter if it was legal. But I think a lot of it was legal.
Yeah, I mean, they do it legally.
Yeah. And then by the time the legality doesn't matter anymore and you realize it, it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's why we should be very interested and very insistent on our rights being explicit in the Constitution. And you might argue with me and say, well, that's going to go out the window and they are already working their way around that. But that's the highest source of authority that we have when it comes to law.
Yeah.
We got to do the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now we're in nowhere's land. No man's land.
Yeah.
No woman's land.
No woman's land.
Well, that's all I have for us today.
A lot I didn't know.
The land grab thing's super interesting.
Yeah, that really, really, really got me.
I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.